Welcome to Chem 230. We're going to do a little bit of practice with subatomic particles and atomic composition. And I like this kind of summary table so that I can see what information I've been given and what I might be able to figure out from that information. So before I start, I usually refresh my memory on what some of the symbols mean. Z is the atomic number and corresponds to the number of protons and identifies the element. So that's a really important one. A is the mass number. That is the sum of the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. And then Q is the charge. And you can get that mathematically by taking the number of protons, which contribute positive charge, minus the number of electrons, which contribute the negative charge. So overall, the balance between protons and electrons gives you the charge. So Q being charge, Z being atomic number, and A being mass number. Each one gives us some particular information. Often I just think intuitively, if there's 2 more electrons than protons, something's going to have a -2 charge. But regardless, let's pile into this and see what we've got. Okay, so the first one, we don't have the symbol or the atomic number or the number of protons, so it looks like we need that to be able to identify what we're talking about. So let's look at the information we do have. Again, -1 for charge means there's more electrons than protons. 1 more electrons than protons. So there's our entry. We have 15 electrons, which is 1 more to give us the negative charge. So number of protons has got to be 14. And then if we check with our little formula, 14 minus 15 equals -1. So the charge is working out now. Then I notice I have the number of neutrons plus the number of protons. And if we add those, we get the mass number. So mass number should be the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. 14 plus 16 is 30. Excellent. Now that we have the number of protons, that identifies the element. So if we look at the periodic table quickly, we see element 14 is silicon, and that would have 14 as its atomic number because that's the number of protons. So the first one is a silicon 30. In a lot of the nomenclature, they'll put a 30 here for where the mass number goes. The other thing, you might see it written out. So the first one is silicon 30, and it's an ion. Silicon doesn't normally form a -1 charge, but in this case, if something has 14 protons and 15 electrons, that would give it a -1 charge. So this is a silicon anion, silicon 30 anion with a -1 charge. Alright, so getting right back into it, Z is given to us, which is the atomic number, which automatically means we can tell what element it is. If something has 6 protons, an atomic number 6, it's got to be carbon, so in an organic class that should sound pretty good. Again, once we have protons and neutrons, protons plus neutrons equals mass number, 13, and this is not the number on the periodic table. So the number on mass on the periodic table is an average mass. We're talking about a very particular particle here that has 6 protons and 7 neutrons, so it would have a mass of 13 and would be heavier than your typical carbon. So again, in the language that you might see here, this is a carbon 13 based on its nucleus having a mass of 13. And then we look and see the number of protons equals the number of electrons. So in this case we have no charge, it's neutral. So notice I'm filling out each thing in the table, and what I probably should have done is grab a different color rather than the pencil so you could see which things I figured out and how I figured them out. So I'm referring always to these equations, that the number of protons plus the number of neutrons gives me the mass number, and the number of protons minus the electrons gives us the charge. So if I have same number of electrons as protons, the charge is 0. Alright, so the last one. This looks like a 0, but that's the ambiguity of our symbols. This is a symbol, it's going to be a letter. That's the letter O. So we look the letter O, oxygen, up on the periodic table. We find out that's atomic number 8. Number of protons then would be 8. And now I can see the mass number, 18. So mass number equals 18. And it equals the protons plus neutrons. So often I like to write the equation first and then fill things in. So mass number is going to be the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. Now we have 18 as the mass number, 8 is the number of protons. And if you need to reach for a calculator, go ahead and do so. We have to subtract 18 minus 8 to find out what goes in the box. 10 plus 8 is 18. Excellent. So now we know we have 10 neutrons. So an oxygen 18 has 8 protons. It has to, or it wouldn't be oxygen. And to have the mass number of 18, it would have to have 10 neutrons to have the sum of protons plus neutrons equal the 18. And then now we want to look at the charge. Last thing to fill out in the box here. 8 protons, 8 positive charges, 10 electrons, 10 negative charges. So if 2 extra negative charges, this has apparently gained 2 electrons and become oxide with a -2 charge. So the oxygen 18 anion, as I've got it written out there, would be oxide and have a charge of 2-. And in this case it's a heavier isotope. Oxygen is typically 16 grams per mole, but this one has a few extra neutrons, so it's 18. So here we're going to again add to the symbol the mass number. The charge of 0 is not written. The charge of -2 is written. So here's a little bit to play with, and you might want to just look and say, if I have a silicon 30 with a -1 charge, and somebody just told you this information, how would that work into the table? So you're given silicon, you know 14 is the atomic number, 30 would be the mass number, then you could fill out the number of neutrons by doing the math. So if given information like this, you should be able to fill in the table. If you're given enough information in the table, you can figure out the rest of the information in the table and then name the element and its mass number. So not too long, about 8 minutes. I hope it wasn't too fast, because once you practice this a lot, it's really easy to go really quickly, but you guys have the luxury of pausing the video and replaying little parts, or email me and ask me questions if you have any questions about any of this. So hopefully this is helpful and good practice. If you need any additional assistance, let me know.